Welcome to Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy. Have you missed me? It's been a few months. It's been a while. We haven't been on, obviously, since the Super Bowl back in February. We did some great NFL playoff shows, thanks to good friends of mine, Trevor Harris, Davis Alexander. They joined me on the show during the NFL playoffs. That in January. We did some great shows. Philip Nelson, who was a big part of the show last year for NFL and college football season, he'll be back later this season once we get into NFL and college football. And as you can see next to me here, we've got someone that you're very familiar with, joined the show a handful of times last year as well, especially in the CFL portion of the season, because he's still following the league closely. Of course, you know him well, former CFL quarterback, right now located in Texas. Will Arndt joining us here on the show to get us going for a brand new season of Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy. The 2025 CFL season is here. We're here to break it all down. Just an overall look at the teams going into the season, and then we will look at the Week 1 games specifically. But first, Will, we welcome you back. It's good to see you. And like I said, how are things going with you now as we head to the summer?
Yes, sir. It's good to be back, ready to talk some CFL ball with all you guys, and honored to be on for your week 1 episode. Everything's good on the road, as you can see. Um, did a movie, got some football stuff in the works. But as always, keeping in touch with my people in the CFL and looking to share a little bit of that with our good friends here today.
No doubt. What we're going to do is we're going to go through all just quick hitters before we get it. We'll obviously talk Week 1 games specifically as usual. There are 4 games to get things going. One on Thursday, one on Friday, and a Saturday doubleheader as well. But first, we're going to go just quickly, team by team, with some brief thoughts on what to expect here for the upcoming season. We'll basically go east to west. And we'll go from the furthest east team in the CFL to the furthest west team. So with that in mind, we'll begin with the Montreal Alouettes, a team that last year got to the East Division final and lost to the Toronto Argonauts, who were, of course, the eventual Grey Cup champions. Montreal was the Grey Cup champion 2 years ago in 2023. I guess the main thing to talk about with Montreal is a change in the guard at quarterback. Cody Fajardo gone, and Davis Alexander given the keys to the car. And as someone that's had Davis Alexander on the show, gets to talk to him a couple of times, from time to time, I can tell you right now he has been living in the gym, living in the training facilities all off season. He is taking this opportunity, and certainly taking it seriously and making sure that he is as prepared physically as possible for his first attempt, I guess you could say, to be a full-time starting quarterback in the CFL. And look, he's a guy that came in and replaced Cody Fajardo last year. It was very solid. In fact, didn't lose a start, filling in for Cody Fajardo when he was injured last year. So they've seen enough, even in a small sample size, to think Davis is ready for this opportunity. The big shock, Will, Walter Fletcher getting cut in training camp from the
Yeah.
Montreal Alouettes. And really, it's just he was victimized by Stevie Scott playing great, and he was a great college running back at Indiana. This Travis Tice, who is part of the training camp roster, he was a kick return machine for them in the preseason. And I think it just got to the point where Jason Moss, the head coach, says, I can't cut these two guys. They've been too impressive. And, Walter Fletcher, a little bit older, than those two guys that they kept. And I think that's what the decision came down to being. The offensive line, to me, Will's the biggest question mark. I think it's a offensive line that at times last year was kind of up and down. I don't have many questions about the defense. I think the defense is very good. I think up front they can get a pass rush. You look at what they've got with the secondary with Wesley Sutton, Tyrese Beverette, Marc-Antoine Dequoy, one of the best safeties in the CFL. That's going to be a very, very good Montreal defense. I think for them, it's can they protect Davis Alexander? Can they run the football? And how well will Davis do in his first year as a starting quarterback full time? I like Montreal a lot, Will. I'll tell you that right now. I bet him to win the East. I bet him to win the Grey Cup, which is around plus 525. And I think as far as on paper entering this year, as far as continuity, I think for the most part they've got it. Same coaching staff. I think Davis will be fine. As long as that O-line's not awful, I think he's going to be able to make plays. And don't forget, he's a dual threat. He can escape the pocket and make plays when the pocket collapses. So I like this Montreal team a lot, Will. What say you about the Alouettes?
Of course, so eloquently broken down. Um, Yeah, I mean, ultimately, where you start and where you stop with this is going to be Davis Alexander. That is an incredibly um, impactful move on so many other levels. I agree. I think they're going to be solid on the defensive side of the ball. My experience with Noel Thorpe led defenses is they can be unorthodox. They give teams fits when they might be on a hot streak. So they're going to do some good stuff on defense. I like some of their personnel that you mentioned. Um, but as in regards to Davis Alexander, I think, no matter how much you prepare and how much you set yourself up to be ready, it is still your first go round at it. And I think there's going to be some bumps in the road that come along with that. I think Jason Moss is a great guy to have alongside him um, to kind of lead the way emotionally and schematically. Um, I'm not as bullish as you are. I think the East is in interesting position compared to the West this year. But I think, as we mentioned previously before the show, I think it's such an interesting year in the CFL because it's so wide open. You could make the case for so many different teams or make the case against so many different teams. So um, he's going to be the guy to watch as he goes. They will go. I appreciate, and I'm sure the audience can appreciate your breakdown on them releasing Walter Fletcher. I had a chance to be a part of the coaching staff with Edmonton when he was first breaking into the league, and I always really liked his game. And I remember when we ended up trading him over to Montreal, and I was like, man, what a good player. They were really getting a good one, and they have the last 2 years. But like you mentioned, when you just have two young players that are at that position younger and productive and cheaper, sometimes you just are forced to make those moves, not as so much a referendum on the player, but nonetheless, I like some of their personnel. I think they're going to be competitive, absolutely in the mix, but it's all going to come back to the quarterback because this is a quarterback league. So I'm not as bullish, but we all can be proved wrong. He's 26, he's in his prime, he's got tools, so we'll see.
Yeah, it's not fun to agree all the time. That's why in my industry, Will, that's why they have a sports book. If everyone was betting the same team in every game, there wouldn't be a betting marketplace, would there? So from that standpoint, you need disagreement. You need people to be on different sides. There's
Yep.
no doubt. It's what makes the world go round. Here's what I like, too, about Montreal. They brought in Sean Oakman from the Argos, an incredibly great interior D lineman. They've got Mustafa Johnson there. I think that's going to shore that group up. Pass rush is still, we'll see if they can find someone. They don't have a dominant pass rusher, but the rest of that D line, especially the interior, it's going to be hard to run on Montreal. That is for sure. And then you look at the receiving core, Will. Tyson Philpott had a breakthrough for this
Yep.
team last year. He's incredible. You look at Cole Speaker and how great he's become at the receiving at wide receiver for this team. They get Austin Mack returning from the National Football League. Remember, he returned late in the season last year, was hampered a little bit by injuries. Look out if he's healthy now. I mean, Davis Alexander is going to have no shortage of weapons and no
No.
shortage of options at receiver. I think that has become, believe it or not, one of the strengths of this Montreal Alouettes team is who they can line up at receiver because, they've got a lot of bona fide difference makers and impact players as far as being able to catch the football when a Davis Alexander throws it to them. What if Tyler Snead, the kid out of East Carolina, stays healthy too? James Letcher, who they've used in kick return game in the past, they're going to use him more in the offense as a receiver this year. Charleston Rambo, there's another one, on this out. I mean, they're loaded at receiver. There's no doubt.
Oh yeah.
So that is going to be something to watch for because I think there's definitely going to be a lot of weapons to work with here in the offense for Davis Alexander. Ottawa Red Blacks next up. Ottawa, resurgent season for sure last year. A winning season, playoff spot. It is definitely a season that was a step in the right direction for a team that had a lot of lean years. Will saw that firsthand a couple of years ago, the tougher times of the Ottawa Red Blacks for sure, both as player and coach for the team for a little bit. I think it's one of those deals where last year, they're one of these, the statistical numbers guys, Will, are not going to like Ottawa coming into this year because there was a lot of last year where they were outgained and out-yarded and outstatted and still found ways to win games. They won turnover margin. Their defense was giving up a ton of yards, but they forced a bunch of turnovers. I remember that's how they beat Chad Kelly in Toronto in one of the games late in the regular season. You could say even in the playoff game. where even lost the playoff game, but a lot of the points they got were off turnovers there. So from
Right.
that standpoint, Ottawa was very good at forcing turnovers. But the defense, I think the turnovers that they forced kind of masked the fact that they gave up chunks of yards and big plays, and teams were able to move the football pretty well against Ottawa last year. That being said, I like the GM because he was here in Hamilton, and I saw firsthand how good he
Right.
was, Burke, and what a nice job he did, just infusing the level of personnel and talent with with the Ticats, and he's done that. No question with Ottawa. Drew Brown now a second year where he knows he's the guy as the starting quarterback. We'll see what that brings for him. I still have concerns about the defense for the Ottawa Reds, especially the secondary coming into this year. That is still an area where I wonder how truly good they're going to be. There's still a lot of changes back there. I like Santos Knox at the linebacker spot, Darius Pickett, being part of that linebacking core too. I think up front they're fine. When you look at Cleon Lang, Michael Wakefield, Lorenzo Malden, that's a guy that Burke took from Hamilton, brought him into Ottawa. He's been a great pass rusher for this Red Blacks team. I think they're solid up front. I think the linebacking core is decent, but the secondary, there's a lot of new faces. You know what it's like bringing in new cornerbacks, new DBs. That's an adjustment period often, especially early in the season. On the offensive side of the football, it'll be interesting. They brought in William Stanback, veteran running back now for this Ottawa team. I know it's kind of the latter part of his career now, but they're hoping they couldn't run the football very well last year. There was very little run game for Ottawa. They knew they had to address it. We'll see if they are able to here. Like I said, with Drew Brown at the helm as far as the running as the quarterback is concerned, the receiving core, Justin Hardy, Braylon Addison, they're back once again. Unfortunately, there's a guy that got injured for them, Will, in training camp, Nick Mardner. He's a guy that was really starting to play well for Ottawa, and season over with an injury in training camp, and that's awful. Nobody likes to see that. It's heartbreaking.
6'6" Canadian. Oof, that would have
Heartbreaking,
been nice to
Will.
have. Yeah.
Yeah, heartbreaking to see that. And it doesn't matter if you're a Red Blacks fan or not. If you're a CFL fan and you're a football fan, you enjoy the product, you hate to see any player go through something like this where the season's over before it even starts for them. So that's a terribly unfortunate bit of news. So they're going to need Hardy and Addison to play well. But the guy to watch out for, it's a guy that really exploded onto the scene for Ottawa last year. It's Khalil Pimpleton. This guy is a speed merchant. He's a dynamo. He's electric in the open field. I'm very fascinated to see what Khalil Pimpleton can bring. Bottom line is, Will, I'm not sold on the defense just yet. That was they won in spite of it last year because they scored so many points and they moved the football. I'm going to need to see that defense shore up. I think for Ottawa, they're going to be competitive. They're going to be a solid team. I'm not expecting you to have specific thoughts on some of the coaching staff because I know you worked with some of them, but I thought Bob Dice in particular, there were a couple of management situations late in games he could have handled a little bit better last year. We'll see if that is improved for him going into this season, but I think Ottawa does take a step back. I know last year was a big improvement. I think, though, with this landscape of the East being what it is, Montreal will be very good. Hamilton should be better. Toronto is still, once they get Chad Kelly back, especially, a force to be reckoned with. So I think Ottawa does take a little step back, and I do think they're going to be a team that's going to need to rely on their offense, especially early on. Will, what do you think? This is a franchise that you've certainly had many experiences with in the past. What do you think for the Ottawa Red Blacks 2025?
Yeah, they'll always have a soft spot for me, but I have no problem talking objectively about it. And you mentioned Bob Dice towards the end of your pitch there, and he should be better with some of the situational stuff.
From all
He's now.
indications, I just want to say he's a great man. Players love him.
Oh
That's
yeah,
never been an issue with Bob Dice. It's just some of these in-game situations and when to challenge, when to do this, when to make that decision. I think he could improve on it a little bit, but there's no doubt players want to play for that guy. Yeah.
totally. Yep, they will play hard. They'll be bought in, and he's in his second full go around at it, so he should be better in that regard. As for more of the football piece, bringing in Rick Campbell as the special teams coordinator, that's really nice addition for them. All the experience and stuff that he brings, especially with Ottawa in itself. And I think they're always going to be with those two guys there. They're going to be good situationally. They're going to be sound. Their special teams are going to be productive. We saw Devontae Dedmon take one to the house during preseason. They're going to be good there. Um, the defense, I'm with you. Bringing in William Fields, a new defensive coordinator. I know you touched on some of the personnel on the coaching side. First time DC. There's just things that come along with that, continuity and situational stuff and schematics and new players, new relationships. So that'll be interesting to watch that develop over time and what kind of stylistically he takes over, coming over from the Toronto coaching tree. Um, as for the offense, I've always kind of felt this way about Tommy Condell offenses. They're streaky, and he can really like draw it up and get guys open. And Drew Brown's going to throw for a ton of yards. I just am not super sold on them in the big picture of winning the East, but they're moving in the right direction. They're absolutely going to be a competitive team, kind of like they were last year. And I really do like a lot of the skill position players they had. Unless I'm missing something, I do remember that Eugene Lewis is also there, right?
He is, and people are losing their minds over this, saying, "Oh, it's a huge boost. It's a huge pickup." I don't know. To me, I watched Eugene Lewis a lot last year. I thought he had a down year by his standards, and he's not getting any younger. So from that standpoint, I say, you know what? Maybe if it's 5 years ago, giddy up. Yay, Eugene Lewis, here we go. I want to see it here this year because I saw a little long in the tooth starting to show up for him last year.
Yep, no argument there. But I think just in terms of stylistically putting together a receiving core, with I had Justin Hardy and I got to call plays for him his first year in the league, and he wasn't a name back then, but I remember using him and wanting to get him the ball because he was such a good player in so many different facets, going over the middle, being a route runner, just being able to be a smart player. With him, and then the explosiveness and the speed of Pimpleton coming on, and then Braylon Addison and that continuity with.
Let's hope he stays healthy because Addison.
Yeah, for sure. He's been dynamic when he's been healthy. And then, you have a Eugene Lewis, which allows you to stretch the field. You're 50-50 ball guy. So I think, it's put together well. And then I think the change at running back should bode well for them. So I like a lot of the things they have in place. I'm not there yet with the team right now, but like I said, I always have a soft spot for them. I'll always root for them. But objectively, I'm just not sold on them just yet. But it will be competitive in the East.
Next up, we've got the Toronto Argonauts, the defending Grey Cup champions, and of course, East Division champions. Obviously, there's a lot up in the air with Toronto. When you're a Grey Cup champion, you're going to lose some players in the offseason. Yep. It's that simple. And there are some concerns with Toronto in that regard. Well, first of all, Chad Kelly starting the season, not the starter. He is back to practice for the Argos this week, but he is not going to start week one against Montreal. Nick Arbuckle, who, of course, look, he's had some ups and downs, more downs than ups in his career, but my goodness, did he ever catch fire when they needed him to in the East Final and Grey Cup last year. What a performance by Nick Arbuckle. It was tremendous what he was able to do in the Grey Cup win against Winnipeg. He was great, most valuable player in the Grey Cup win for the Argos in relief of an injured Chad Kelly, who, busted his leg, obviously, in the East Final. The week before or 2 weeks before against Montreal. So he's still recovering from that, not quite ready to return. It'll be Nick Arbuckle starting. The question is now, you got all offseason to study up for Nick Arbuckle now. He's the guy to begin the year, at least for a week or two. Can he perform still, at that level? They've still got, lots of receivers to work with for him. They like Dejon Brissett, DeMonte Coxey, Devaris Daniels, Kevin Mattal is someone that a lot of the Argos people close to them say, look out for him. He could break out this year. Here's another team that made a stunning cut of a veteran running back in training camp. With Montreal, it was Fletcher, and with the Argos, it was Kadeem Carey. Not bringing Kadeem Carey back because they like Deontay McMahon and Mayan Williams, who has a lot of speed. They like him in the backfield and primarily going to go with those two. Here's the biggest issue for me, Will, with Toronto. Defense is almost starting from scratch, almost. Other than, now they do have their MVP and captain of the defense still, of course, Wynton McManus, who's, just a sensational player. There's no doubt. He's just phenomenal, just reads the play extremely well. But they've lost 6 players in their D-line rotation from last year, 6 going into this year. And that's definitely concerning. They have lost so much there, huge hits along the D-line, massive personnel loss in the secondary. as well. I know that for a fact because one of them came to Hamilton, Deshaun Amos, in the offseason. There's a lot of new faces on the D line and in the secondary, and a lot of inexperience there. And that could show up early in the season. So and we'll get into this more with these Argos Alouettes game for Friday night in week 1 specifically, but I'm looking at them as an over team early in the season. They're going to need to score points because I think there's just a lot of new faces on defense, especially on the D line and secondary. Those two position groups have been fucking ravaged, entering this new season. So I get concerned the defense could be a little bit behind, Will, of this offense early in the year for the Argos. So I've kind of got to, kind of fade them early on / look at overs, and specifically maybe team total overs for the opponent against Toronto early in the season. But what are your thoughts, Will, on the defending Grey Cup champions?
Yeah, a lot of changes. I'm sitting here looking at their roster right now. Talking about the defense, I mentioned William Fields before. Got a new defensive coordinator in place there, and they lost a lot of personnel. But, they have always been a good team. I'm sure you know this as a Hamilton fan. They've always been able to put talent in place. It always felt like their personnel was pretty solid the last 5 years under their management. So, it's to be seen. There's a lot of new names, not to say they can't be good and productive. But, I looking at Cameron Judge and Wynton McManus, those guys are dudes.
Yeah, Cam Judge
so,
comes
yeah,
over, yes, from Calgary. Definitely
yeah.
worth noting that. Yep.
So good players there, and then I feel like I've over the last couple of years on the show, defended Nick Arbuckle, when everyone was down on him. But in regards to obviously a solid number 2, I wouldn't say it's someone you would be, expecting to carry the load the entire season, but they'll be solid. Nothing jumps off the page for me like it has in the past with personnel that I'm bullish on. Certainly some uncertainty, but I'm sure they'll probably hit their groove once Chad gets back in the saddle, because I don't think anybody would really argue how talented and productive he's been. Take out the stuff and the he was excellent when he was.
I think we lost.
New personnel here.
Yeah, I think we lost you for a second, or your reception's just cutting in and out. So what you can do is try to exit the studio, come back in, see if that makes a difference. Sometimes that. Oh, there we go. I think it ironed itself out. There we go. I think you're good now again.
Let me know if you got me. I see
got you. Yeah, you're good again. Yeah,
I got you. All right. Well, I'll just wrap that up. So, a lot of new personnel. I think once Chad Kelly gets back in the saddle, Ryan Dinwiddie's a fantastic coach. They have a championship pedigree there. They got a solid number 2 quarterback, obviously. And they've been given the benefit of the doubt. But as I've been saying in previous teams, no clear number 1 out in the East this go round.
Yeah, I would agree with that for sure. It's a wide open East division, including for my Hamilton Tiger Cats. I will be back in the building. No longer Tim Hortons Field, Hamilton Stadium, the new name of the building this year. Look, I have no concerns whatsoever about the offense. It's got the potential to be loaded, phenomenal. Bo Levi Mitchell, over 5,000 passing yards last year. And don't forget, this is a guy that didn't even play every game. He got benched for 2 games, and he still threw for over 5,000 passing yards last year. That's how crazy that was. I mean, they're loaded in the receiving core. There's no doubt. I mean, when you look at, you can put out there Kenny Lawler, who you bring in from Winnipeg, Tim White, Keandre Smith, Drew Olatarski, now veteran presence, comes over from that Bombers team as well. You've now committed to Greg Bell as your running back, and he showed you pretty good signs of what he can do last year. The O-line is solid. They're going to be able to put up points. There's no doubt. It's going to be the defense. The defense was terrible last year. It's what kept Hamilton out of the playoffs. They couldn't get a pass rush. The secondary was a shambles last year. Now they've shored up the secondary. They bring in Reggie Stubblefield, who was great with Montreal. They bring in Deshaun Amos from the Argos, to go with obviously Jamal Peters back from last year. I mean, the secondary for sure on paper is better. But I've said this before about the Hamilton defense, that's going to be better coming into the year, and sometimes doesn't always play that way. It still could take time. You are talking about still a new system and a new DC and Brent Monson taking over at that spot as the new defensive coordinator for the Ticats. Bottom line is, I think the arrow is pointing up for the Ticats, but it's going to have to be early in the year, their offense. It's going to have to carry the way for them. So look for overs, look for Ticat team totals over. In fact, if you want to bet Hamilton early in the season, I'm not sure that the defense on paper has better personnel this year compared to last year. Nobody can deny that, but it still might take time for the group to gel. It's a new DC, and there still could be some growing pains on the defensive side of the football early on for the Ticats. So what I would say is if you want to bet on Hamilton early in the year, maybe the team total over instead of taking the money line or spread might be the better way to go. Trust in their offense. I think their defense is better and will be better, but it may take time still. Will, your thoughts here on the Hamilton Tiger Cats?
Yeah, to me, this is the most interesting team. As of right now, this is my pick to win the East. Believe it or not, I'm sure you love to hear that.
Wow, I do love to hear that. Even I don't have them winning the East, but I appreciate that.
Yeah, I just think coach quarterback combo, I really like it. I think Scott Milanovich has done a pretty good job with all things considered in the last couple of years. Bo is obviously very hot. No reason that can't continue. Having a guy like Kenny Lawler and having Tim White there and a new defensive coordinator from a very good coaching tree. I think the arrow is up, and it really only can go up based on all the things you highlighted before. Not a lot of dudes on the defensive side of the ball. You got some solid players like a Jamal Peters, Deshaun Amos, but I just wish there was another X factor on that defensive line or pass rush.
I hope the former Ticats ready to play well this year for us. Julian Hauser's back to bolster the pass rush. Hopefully he can.
Yep, solid player. But it's a team I'm bullish on. I think, like you mentioned, it's going to be the offense that's going to have to carry the weight. But, new defensive coordinator, new scheme, you get things buttoned up. You're well coached. You play together. You can overcome some of those struggles that we talked about. But coaching quarterback, I think they're rock solid, and I've always liked Taylor Powell. As he gets more experience, I think, and as we've seen in the past, your second quarterback, God forbid, knock on wood over here, seems to play every year, and I really like what he's shown. Especially watching his offseason clips, like I can spin it. But nonetheless, I'm interested on Hamilton. I think they're going to do some good stuff and make some noise this year.
From your lips to what's ears. We hope that, no doubt. Let's hope for a great season. It would be nice for a change because they have not been able to do this since the pandemic year when the season got wiped out. There was no season in 2020. They haven't had a better than 500 start to a season since before the pandemic. That's let's have a good start for a change. Wow. Enough with this nonsense of 1-3 coming out of the gate, 1-4, 2-5, 2-3. Enough with this. Let's start the season strong for a change. Let's not dig ourselves a hole. That's been the Hamilton Ticats way, the last several seasons, is start the season slow and put yourself behind the 8 ball. And they have talked about it, and the team is aware of it, how they have not had a good month of June and early July the last few years. We'll see if they can change that this year and get off to a better start. All right, let's shift to the West Division now. The West Side, as I say for the hip-hop folks out there. Winnipeg Blue Bombers. Look, this team has become the Buffalo. Well, they do, of course, have the couple of Grey Cups against my Ticats, but since then, they've been the Buffalo Bills of the CFL. We get to the Grey title game, we can't win it. And that's been that way now for a few years as this core group led by Zach Collaros gets a little bit, older. How many years do they have left, together? Zach Collaros, Brady Oliveira, of course, defending CFL most outstanding player from last year. It's going to be interesting to see if they have one more run at it and one more, they've obviously been owning the West Division the last few years. I mean, it's hard not to bet them to win the division because they just always seem to win the division. Mike O'Shea, of course, done a great job. There's no question. Chris Drevler, a solid backup option. Terry Wilson, the kid out of Kentucky, in the quarterback room as well. We know Brady Oliveira, outstanding running the ball. The O-line. Now, the O-line, interestingly enough, last year was not nearly as good. And we saw it in the Grey Cup game. Yeah. Collaros was under pressure. And that O-line definitely regressed last year. There was some decline. There's no question about that. Can they get back to playing at that strong level this year, protecting, opening up the run game for Oliveira because they want to be balanced, obviously, in this offense. But meanwhile, you look at the receiving core, it's going to be fine. There's not going to be any issues. They've still got tons of weapons to work with. This Winnipeg Blue Bombers team. Here's someone to keep an eye on for them. Carrick Wheatfall, a guy that in the preseason was just lighting it up for Winnipeg, and he's down the depth chart a little bit, but he may not be down the depth chart for long. This is definitely a player that if he gets opportunity, in the regular season, he may be able to make the most of it. He's certainly impressed in the in the preseason rather for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. Nick Dembski, Dylan Mitchell brought in, Jareth Stearns brought in. They've got a healthy Dalton Schoen. Remember, his season ended very early last year due to injury, and now Dalton Schoen is healthy and back for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. So there's a big weapon for them as far as the receiving corps is concerned. The defensive side of the football, I do hate that they lost a couple of guys there. Demario Houston's one of them. As far as that secondary, they did take a little bit of a hit there. Are they going to be a little bit more vulnerable? We'll have to wait and see. Up front, you've still got, and getting older, but Willie Jefferson still, one of the better pass rushers in the CFL. They really like Ryder Cramdy at the linebacker spot. Pretty solid position there for them. So, look, they're going to be solid, in my opinion, again. Now, what makes this hard to pick against or bet against Winnipeg, Will, is last year they couldn't have started worse. They couldn't have. They were awful in the first month, and they still ended up just getting on that red-hot tear in the second half of the year and winning the division and going back to the Grey Cup game, winning the West Final. And so here's my thought with Winnipeg. Slow start again, I could see it. This could be like the New England Patriots were under Brady and Belichick all those years, Will. And what I mean by that is they didn't give two shits about September success. It was about just building toward December and January and getting better as the season goes on and peaking in December and January. I think maybe Winnipeg takes that approach. I don't think it's the worst idea in the world to bet against them early. That maybe they just, round into form, and then just like last year, it's August, September, October, they hit their stride and get going. So I think they're going to be good again, and certainly they're in contention, but don't be surprised if they get off to a little bit of a slow start. That's kind of where I'm at with Winnipeg. Will, what do you think for the Blue Bombers?
Yeah, I think you hit on a lot of good pieces there. We've become so accustomed to this era of Winnipeg and what that looks like, and some of the people. And I'm sitting here looking at the roster, and those familiar faces are becoming less and less occurring. No more Adam Big Hill, Jeff Coat, the offensive line that was dominant for those couple of years was starting to fade a little bit towards the end of the year last year. So not the juggernaut it used to be, but where it's important, they are good. Mike O'Shea is a fantastic coach. Zach Caleros can still spin it. His game will age really well. Some solid players. And then obviously as the weather and the year rolls on, that running game is going to be important. And Brady Oliveira is a perfect CFL running back in terms of downhill, hit it, no wasted movement, falls forward, all that good stuff. So I think like you mentioned, when it matters, like the Patriots, they will be productive, but absolutely in the mix. But if you had to say like arrow up or arrow down, I would say might be starting to go down a little bit, but can never count them out, obviously, as you saw last year.
That's the name. That's who I was thinking. I said there's someone in that secondary, and I mentioned Demario Houston's one of them, but there's someone else that they lost from last year, and I was blanking on it. Tyrell Ford, that's who. Tyrell Ford was outstanding last year for them. I think probably their best corner. He went to Edmonton, signed with his brother Trey Ford there with the Elks. You can get it why he gets to play on the same team as his brother. Why wouldn't you take that opportunity? But that's a big loss for Winnipeg in the second. So that secondary, I do have some concerns about what they look like on paper. Maybe you can throw on them, especially early in the season. We'll have to wait and see. All right, Saskatchewan Roughriders. I like this team. I like Corey Mace. I think it was a great hire. Trevor Harris, as long as he gets the protection, he's my age, so we're not getting any younger. The two of us, we talk about that in the past. We're not getting any younger. We just hope we're getting better. That's all. Again, you protect Trevor Harris and you give him time. He's going to be still terrific throwing the football. You give him the time, he can be as accurate as anybody in the CFL. There's no question about that. It's going to be, can that O-line hold up? And they do have some concerns entering the season. They did suffer a couple of injury concerns along that unit in training camp. So can they overcome it? From all indications, they also want to be more balanced this year with a healthy A.J. Ouellette, who's back now from injury, his second year with the Rough Riders at running back. Be balanced, give him the rock quite a bit, kind of the way Winnipeg does with Brady Oliveira. Just make sure you're balanced and keep defenses honest. And again, they did make some improvements there. Jamarcus Hardrick is finally healthy again at the tackle spot. They signed Sean McEwen, Philippe Gagnon to bolster that O-line. So there's reasons to think they can be balanced. They can run the football better this year. We'll see if they can. And like I said, as long as that O-line holds up, gives Trevor Harris the time, they can be very solid. The defense is very good, for the Saskatchewan Roughriders. And last year we saw that defense, take big strides forward. They lost, obviously, in the West Final to Winnipeg, probably in tough because they didn't have home field advantage for that game. But you look at the defense and, Roland Milligan Jr., most outstanding defensive player last year for the Saskatchewan Roughriders. He was just absolutely spectacular for them. Marcus Sales. They've got CJ Rivas, Jameer Thurman, CJ Avery at linebacker. Very, very solid. Micah Johnson and Mike Rose along the D-line can still get it done. Very, very solid defense on paper. And the receiving core, I think, with Keyshawn Johnson, who showed a lot of flashes. He flashed quite a bit last year. Kean Schaefer-Baker, certainly healthy. Now, they don't have Sean Bain to start the year, but when they get him back, suddenly you're looking at Saskatchewan having, pretty gosh darn good receiving core entering the season, especially once they get Bain back. So I like Saskatchewan. They are my shot in the West to win the West and the Grey Cup. Most of all, I mean, I've taken some smaller shots in the East with Hamilton to win the East and the Grey Cup, but I said earlier, Will, Montreal is my favorite look from a future standpoint in the East to win the division in the Grey Cup. I would say in the West, it's probably Saskatchewan. I really do think, they were right there. Lost in the West Final to Winnipeg last year. I think they can take that next step, that next bit of ascension, and maybe get to the Grey Cup this year. What do you think, Will, for the Saskatchewan Roughriders?
Yeah, just looking at their roster construction, it's a very solid offensive group, and they've bolstered a lot of their Canadian talent. Three Canadians in the offensive line, quite a bit of Canadian talent at receiver, MLS, Kean Schaefer-Baker, amongst some others. But and I'm here looking at their defense, like very solid. Defensive line, Shane Ray, Micah Johnson, Mike Rose, really solid pass rush. The talent you mentioned on the back end, obviously with Milligan Jr., and you have veterans like Sales, you got Tavon Campbell there, and then Jameer Thurman at linebacker, absolute stud, and has been for a long time. So really like the roster construction. They're certainly going to be one of those teams that's in the mix, and with a group that I think is now, with Corey Mays and Trevor Harris really kind of together, I think they're going to continue.
Year two, right? More continuity, correct? Yep.
Yeah. Yep. So I think they'll be absolutely in the mix and competitive. I like a lot of the things that they're doing.
Calgary Stampeders. Look, we know it's been rough. This is a team that was like a model franchise in the CFL for 15, 20 years, and now the last couple of years they've really fallen on hard times. There's people wondering if Dave Dickinson's lost his fastball, as a head coach and GM, because he's come under scrutiny, under fire, for the last couple of years. Last year was a disaster in all facets. I mean, the defense was horrific. I mean, they were giving up 30, 40 points with regularity in the second half of the season last year. The quarterback play was abysmal. Jake Mayer was horrific. I got to be honest. I mean, he was just not very good. I mean, too many interceptions, not reading the defense properly, bad decisions, put the ball in harm's way, took too many sacks. I mean, it was the whole gamut of issues with him at that quarterback spot for Calgary. And then, of course, he struggled, and they went to Logan Bonner, and it really wasn't any better with him. I mean, it was just a disaster for Calgary as far as their season. There was some infighting. I heard there was some kind of in the locker room kind of issue or altercation or incident late in the season last year. We know that there was this much ballyhooed, talked about poll of the players done in the offseason, conducted that Calgary's facilities were the worst in the league. The hot meals sucked, apparently, for Calgary compared to what other players on other teams got. I mean, just a evisceration by the players from an opinion standpoint on the quality of them doing their job with this franchise, whether it was, the preparation, the coaching, the facilities, the training center, whatever, the the food they get, during the games, pregame, postgame. I mean, it was just a McMahon Stadium falling apart. That stadium desperately needs a renovation or to build a new one of the two. So it's ugly right now. This is probably one of the worst situations going in the CFL. But there is some good news, Will. I will offer one bit of hope for the Stamps and their fans. Vernon Adams is at the
Yep,
helm,
that's
and
it.
he can only be a massive upgrade. He can
Yep.
only be a massive upgrade. And that's if he even struggles a little bit. He's still a massive upgrade from what they had last year at the quarterback spot. There are weapons to work with. Reggie Bagleton, I like. You give him a halfway decent quarterback, and he's a really good receiver for the Calgary Stampeders, no question. He's had 3,000-yard receiving seasons in the last 5 years, Reggie Bagleton. They add Tevin Jones and Dominique Rhymes. Malik Henry, whose season was over in training camp last year with an injury that ended his season, much like poor Nick Mardner with Ottawa, and now he's healthy. And they really like Malik Henry, the Calgary Stampeders. So there's weapons. But the O-line is, a work in progress. I do like Dedrick Mills, but again, running the football, but he needs a good O-line. The problem is the defense, okay? They gave up over 500 points. I think they were right there with Hamilton, most points allowed by a defense last year. And they did make some improvements up front. They brought Fuller in, Arumalade from the Argos. They've got a couple players along that D-line. That should help. The secondary is a concern, though. Okay, there's some jettison players in that secondary. There's a lot of new faces, and there's a lot of new faces, period, Will, on this defense. Jamie Nye, who's done a great job covering the league for years. I think most of all, he's covered Saskatchewan all these years. But Jamie Nye, one of his articles on CFL.ca, 75% of the Calgary Stampeders roster on defense is new faces, new players. That 75%. That's unbelievable. That's 3/4 of your defense, new players in new positions. You got to think for a defense that wasn't very good last year to begin with, that's going to be a problem early in the season for this Calgary defense. So I look at them as you bet against their defense, take the other team over their team total. Anything prop wise with against this Calgary defense is worth a look, and just overs in general, because I think the offense, there is some hope with Vernon Adams and a pretty good receiving core that they can put up some points. But the defense, man, it's in a really bad way, and I think it's going to take some serious time for that unit to mesh into a good one, if they do. Will, what do you think here for Calgary?
Yeah, great breakdown. I, looking at their roster, a lot of new names, like you mentioned. And, I can recall over the past couple of years, always just kind of given this coaching staff, organization, leadership, the benefit of the doubt, because, for my time growing and learning and loving the CFL game, they just were always in it. They had a history of winning, and I think at this point, it's been a couple of years. I don't think there's any more reason to be given the benefit of the doubt. And McMahon Stadium is a nice microcosm for how I kind of feel about this team. Um, on the decline, not ideal, not great, falling apart a little bit. However, you can't fault the team for making a lot of changes. They are trying to find their next mix and their next change that's going to put them back on track. So I don't fault them for that, but there's going to be some volatility probably that comes along with that, especially on the defensive side of the ball. But Dave Dickinson will get this group, ready to play. And like you mentioned, I think the offense could be dynamic and competitive in games. Vernon Adams is a very likable guy. He's going to be a good playmaker. Dominique Rhymes is a big play receiver. Reggie Bagleton always been very rock solid and a nice tandem there. So that is the bright spot. And there are some uncertainties to be seen, a lot of new faces, but that's what football is about. So no more benefit to the doubt, but not my favorite team in the West.
Edmonton Elks, they're in the same boat as Calgary. They can only go up. It was a tough year, but they did show a little pulse last year at times, the Edmonton Elks. Trey Ford is going to really be a big part of what makes or breaks the season for them, because there's times where I look at him and I say, this is a MVP caliber player waiting to happen in this league, with the athleticism and the mobility. And he had to sit behind and I'm not a big fan of Chris Jones, I will say that, but he had to sit behind Chris Jones's, idiotic decisions to not start him, not give him opportunities, and they force-fed Edmonton and their fans McLeod Bethel Thompson and all these other quarterbacks every week. And Trey Ford just had to ride the pine. I never agreed with that, but now it's his team. And Mark Killam, the new head coach, Calgary special teams coordinator for many years, taking over as head coach, finally committing to giving Trey Ford, you are the starter, period.
Yep.
No doubts, no questions. You're the guy. And yes, Cody, the one issue, though, is Cody Fajardo's been brought in as the backup. So I love that Killam's saying, you're the guy, and we're going to give you a leash. We're not going to take you out after 1 or 2 bad games. But at some point, if you're 2 months into the season and your offense is sputtering and Trey Ford's not reading the defense properly and making too many interceptions, which is still his issue, I think it's reading the defense and the passing side of things where he's still a work in progress. Then there's going to be clamoring for a guy that won a Grey Cup 2 years ago with the Montreal Alouettes, Cody Fajardo, to come in. It's really, that's all there is to it. So, but he gets his opportunity. I like it. You look at this Edmonton team, and on offense this year, there's certainly talent to work with. When you see what Trey Ford's got with Keon Julian Grant, who comes over from Montreal, Stephen Dunbar Jr., Curly Gittens Jr. is a very good receiver as well. Absolutely. I think there's definitely ability. And Keon Julian Grant, look, Montreal's loaded. They can afford to give up Keon Julian Grant, but he's still great. It shows you how deep they are, Montreal, at receiver. Julian Grant's a nice addition. The defense, I love Niles Morgan and Nick Anderson. I love they brought back Jake Ceresna. Jake Ceresna is a terror for this. Saw what he did with Toronto. You saw what he did last year. You saw what he did with Edmonton in his first stint with the Elks. Great guy, too, because I hung out and talked with him at the Grey Cup Festival in Hamilton a couple of years ago. Always wanting him to be well and succeed. And to see him back with this Edmonton defense, it's great. Pass rushing dynamo. His motor never stops. And you factor in, Tyrell Ford, the ball hawk that he is in the secondary, bringing him in from Winnipeg. This defense is definitely better, but maybe a lot better. But it's going to be a question of how quickly does it gel? How quickly does it improve? Is it good right away, or is it going to take some time? But I think in time, that Edmonton defense, it could be one of the better defenses they've had in years. And actually, it should be. But will it take time to get there? On paper, it's certainly better, though. So I'm optimistic, Will, with the Edmonton Elks. What do you think?
Yeah, this is the swing team for me this year. I think they're gonna crush it. I think I'm expecting them to really make some noise, not just like, oh yeah. I'm expecting them to really do some damage in the West. And you might be like, well, that would insinuate that Trey Ford is gonna work out. Well, I'm optimistic for him, but like you said, like they could go a couple of games and they gave him a shot and a leash. And then you have a terrific, proven franchise quarterback in Cody Fajardo. If you find that, hey, you know what, we did give it a good run and it didn't work with him, like you have a guy that can go win you a Grey Cup if that doesn't work out. So that's all the more reason why I really like this team too. They have good enough weapons on the offensive side of the ball. Those receivers that you mentioned before, and then the defense. I think it's excellent on paper. Will it take time to formate a little bit? I don't know. I think there's enough talent here where you can really be productive right out of the gate. Tyrell Ford, ball hawk. Jake Ceresna is going to give you a really good presence on the defensive line. Niles Morgan had over 100 tackles last year. He's been rock solid, even through all the bad years that they've had their last couple of years. Royce Mechie, like I think, David Beard, Mark Cordy on the offensive line. You can't like as a quarterback having an awesome center, and those guys can both play center and being really good Canadian players. I think there's a lot of reasons to be optimistic. So this is the team that I think is going to make some noise this year. Are they my Grey Cup pick? No, but I think they're going to be damn good.
All right, last team, BC Lions. Nathan Rourke. It's just crazy how sentiment can change, Will. I mean, did he struggle at the end of last year? Yeah, but he just came back, from another NFL attempt. He's just plucked in there in the middle of the season. And yeah, could he have played better? Absolutely. It was not vintage Nathan Rourke down the stretch. But now you give him, a full training camp. He's with the team from day one this year. And you saw in the preseason, he's looked great. He went 8 for 8 in the last preseason game against Dead. Like bing, bang, boom, right down the field, points on the board, both drives. I have no concerns about Nathan Rourke. I think he's going to be fine. I think he's going to be solid. I have the concern about the offensive line. It's not Nathan Rourke. It's the O-line. And that was where the issues were with BC last year. But they brought in a guy that was the most outstanding O-lineman last year in the CFL, Dejon Allen. That is a huge, huge boost for the BC Lions offensive line, which can only be better because they gave up way too many sacks, too many hits on the quarterback last year. Nathan Rourke felt that. I love the hire of Buck Pierce. They decided to move on from Rick Campbell. You know, it's funny. We never mentioned this when we talked to Ottawa, Will. Bob Dice has Rick Campbell as a special teams coordinator. The roles were reversed before earlier in the CFL days, where Rick Campbell's the head coach. Bob Dice was a special teams coordinator. So pretty crazy how everything comes full circle with Ottawa there. But, yeah, I love the Buck Pierce hire. Ultra competitive guy, no nonsense, very professional, great CFL playing career. And I think obviously we know the great job he did as offensive coordinator with Winnipeg, all those great Winnipeg offenses. I think Buck Pierce was just a great hire. I don't expect there to be any coaching drop off going to him. I think he's ready for this opportunity finally to be a head coach. And like I said, they've got weapons. They've got Keon Hatcher. They've got Javon Katoy. They've certainly got options there. Have they been deeper in the past at receiver? Yeah, probably than they are this year. But you've still got Katoy. You've got Hatcher. You've got Justin McGinnis, who burst onto the scene last year, was absolutely phenomenal. And this Aiden Eberhardt, keep an eye on him. He showed a lot, as a third, fourth receiver option. James Butler comes back. It didn't work. Look, it just did not work in Hamilton last year with him. It was just not the fit that Milanovic was looking for. It doesn't mean he can't play anymore and he's a bad player. It was just not the greatest fit in Hamilton. But now he's back in BC where he was at his best a couple of years ago. He thrived in BC. He thrived in an offense that's going to commit to running the football and being balanced, because that's what we saw, Will, from Buck Pierce offenses in Winnipeg. He doesn't want to throw the football 80% of the time. He wants balance in his offense, throwing it and running the football. James Butler, they're hoping is going to be able to deliver that balance and get back to the level he played at in BC. A full season of Matthew Betts, who's going to be back now to lead the pass rush, after his stint in the NFL occurred. But now he's a full-time BC Lion again this year. Sione Tehema stepped up to be another good pass rusher, get pressure on that D-line last year. Led the team in sacks as well. So you've got Betts and Tehema. Look out on that D-line. There's a lot to like for me with BC, and I love the hire. And I think Nathan Rourke is going to be back to the Nathan Rourke that I think a lot of people expected, from the great season he had, the first stint that he had with the BC Lions. So I like what I see out of BC. Bounced back. It didn't end well last year. They had a rough finish to the season, but I think BC can be, and this is a team in the West too that I would consider maybe, being a threat to come out of the West and maybe win the Grey Cup, because and Nathan Rourke in the most outstanding player betting markets, is worth a shot, in my opinion. In fact, Rourke is worth a shot. I think Davis is worth a shot. Davis Alexander in Montreal. Maybe Bo, if he can stay healthy, just because of the numbers he's probably going to put up. But I think Nathan Rourke's got MOP potential this year here in the CFL. What do you think, Will, for the BC Lions?
Yeah, I'll keep it this short and sweet. This is a team, while the CFL is wide open this year and there's a lot of new across the board, this is my Grey Cup pick. So I think Nathan Rourke will prove to be, if not one of the best players in the league, and I think he'll get back. It's hard. The NFL and American football is different than Canadian football. And while
he likes a feline fight in the Grey Cup, it sounds like.
That's right.
Hamilton
cat
and
on
BC.
cat.
Yeah.
Cat on cat. And yep. And American football is different than CFL football. So there's going to be naturally some struggle for him at the end of the season last year. But those of you that kind of follow, I'm sure he's absolutely put in the work, put in the time. You got a great head coach, good offensive system. I think there's enough pieces around him. Justin McInnis, the CFL receiving yards leader last year. They got Javon Gatoy as a good inside, big body receiver. They got James Butler at running back. The defense should be solid. I just think there's a lot to like here, and this is my pick to go all the way.
All right, there you go. So you like BC in the West, Will, and you like Hamilton in the East. So we already know what your Grey Cup final prediction is for this season. For me, I'm going to go Montreal, Saskatchewan, with Montreal winning. That's what I'm going to go with. Montreal,
Nice.
Saskatchewan, Grey
Wow.
Cup final, Grey
Bullish,
Cup
Davis
game.
Alexander, huh?
Yeah, I think he is. I know firsthand and hearing from him the work he's put in, man. The work he's put in has been sensational. And I guess the only concern you'd have is it was only 3-4 games that we saw him as a starter last year, but there were 3-4 really friggin' good games. And with the work ethic, and I think the heavy heart he's playing with because his dad passed away, and his dad was a huge football guy, and just the most supportive and nurturing father for him, supporting his football journey. And I think it matters a lot to him to, make his dad proud from upstairs and, do it for him. I think there's that emotional bent to Davis Alexander in the season that he's about to embark on here with the Montreal Alouettes. So it's Hamilton, BC for Will. It's Montreal, Saskatchewan for me as far as a Grey Cup prediction here in 2000. Look, Winnipeg, the concern for me with the Saskatchewan side of it for me, and probably BC for you, is Winnipeg just always seems to get there out of the West. But it's not going to happen. They're not going to get to every fucking Grey Cup the rest of eternity in the CFL. One of these years, Will, they're not going to get there. One of these years, and maybe this year. So you're saying it won't be this year for Winnipeg. Finally, they'll miss getting to the Grey Cup game, and I say so as well. So we'll see how that plays out. We both think the Bombers are finally not going to get back to the Grey Cup game out of the West. I'll just throw out a couple of futures. Then we'll go rapid fire through the week 1 games. We're just going to say picks where, we've done the analysis of all the teams. So we'll just go through picks for week 1. We'll go into in-depth game by game next week, obviously week 2. But just quickly on some futures that I like. BC over 9.5 wins. Montreal over 10.5 wins. Ottawa under 10.5 wins. Toronto under 11.5 wins. I think that's my favorite. Toronto under 11.5 wins. I think that defense just lost too much. It's going to take time. And again, who knows how long Chad Kelly will miss. He'll miss at least a week, maybe 2. So those are some of the win totals, I bet. Regular season passing yards leader, Bo at plus 300, Vernon Adams at plus 410, Davis Alexander at plus 880. So there you go for my shots with passing yards leader. Regular season receiving yards leader, McGinnis for BC plus 630. Kenny Lawler, Hamilton, plus 750. Reggie Bagleton for Calgary at plus 880, and I'll explain why. Because they're going to be playing from behind a lot this year. So they're going to have to throw the football a lot more. So maybe Bagleton racks up those receiving yards. Justin Artie, I think, for Ottawa at plus 880. And I think the real value shot is Dalton Schoen. If he's healthy, he was one of the best receivers in the CFL 2 years ago for the Bombers. So plus 1,100 on Dalton Schoen. Brady Oliveira seems like, I'm pretty confident in that he'll be the league's leading rusher again, barring injury. That's why he's only plus 150. He's plus 150 for a good reason. Butler for BC is the only other guy I would consider for league leading rusher because of the fact they will commit to running the football in a Buck Pierce offense. And Butler did great with BC. He was a great fit there last time he was there. Mitchell, Bo Levi Mitchell, that is over 45-25 passing yards. I think that's worth, you got 5,000 last year. Why not this year? James Butler over 925.5 rushing yards for the season. And then my most outstanding player shots this year, Rourke plus 800, Bo Levi Mitchell plus 800, Davis Alexander plus 1,200. And I even sprinkled on Vernon 20-1 because even though Calgary may not have a great year, he's going to throw the ball a lot and he still could have some pretty good numbers. So, and then of course, as I mentioned, Montreal to win the East primarily. Hamilton, a little smaller East Division future. Saskatchewan, my primary West Division winner. Future, smaller on BC. I sprinkled slightly on Edmonton and Calgary for West and Grey Cup, Will, just for one reason, the price. For them to win the Grey Cup, I don't expect them to, but you're talking 25-1 odds. All they have to do is if they make the playoffs, they only have to win 1 or 2 games and they're in the Grey Cup game. You're going to have hedging opportunities. You're going to have opportunities to lock in a profit if they get far enough with the prices they are. So that for that reason only, I took the small shots with Edmonton, Calgary to win the Grey Cup. So there you go. And like I said, Montreal and Saskatchewan, my 2 favorite Grey Cup futures. All right, just quickly on the 4 games this week, Ottawa, Saskatchewan. I think Saskatchewan gets it done. They're 3.5-point favorites, 49.5 the total, the home field. Like I said, for Ottawa, another thing too, Will, they were 2-7 in the regular season on the road last year, Ottawa. They were not a very good road team. They're going to have to show me they can be better. What do you think for the week 1 season opener here, Will, Thursday night, Red Blacks, Riders.
Yep, had the same stat, 2-7 on the road. Saskatchewan at home, probably the best home crowd, home environment, home field advantage in the CFL. Year 2 for this group. Bang the win, bang the over, all that stuff.
There you go. All right, good stuff. Yeah, the total. I like some overs this week. I'm on the fence with this one. I think Saskatchewan probably scores. What does Ottawa do offensively on the road against this pretty good Saskatchewan defense? This is an over I can sign up for, Will. Toronto and Montreal. We talked about Toronto D-line depleted, secondary depleted, a lot of new faces. Those two position groups lost a lot from last year, and it could be groups where Montreal can run the football against that depleted defensive line with a lot of new faces. So it could be a game where Stevie Scott and Travis Tice and the new look running back group have success for Montreal. They can throw the ball. Davis Alexander, dual threat. I think that offense, the Alouettes team total over, I definitely like in this game. In fact, I probably like that more than the -4.5 spread, that Montreal can go over 26.5, their team total here in this game. And full game over I like, because one thing about Arbuckle is he knows the offense. He can move the ball. Montreal's defense will not be easy, but I don't think they're going to pitch a shutout here either against this, very well coordinated as well by Dinwiddie, the Argos offense. Well prepared they usually are. So over 47.5, and specifically I like Montreal and the team total specifically over 26.5. What are your thoughts, Will? Argos, Alouettes.
I'm torn on this one.
Revenge, too. Not that the revenge is overrated. I don't want to say you shouldn't just be betting Montreal because of this, but they did lose in the East Final to Toronto last year at home. So there's that element. It's our first crack at Toronto since they ended our season last year.
I want to take Toronto here. I want to say upset alert. But just
they are historically, as a road dog, decent under Dinwiddie. I just wonder, with all the losses on defense and no Chad Kelly,
right?
Will they
so
be able to get it?
That's what's got me scratching my head. I think I would say the under on this would be the play, in my opinion.
Okay, disagreement. I like it.
Couple of new-ish, well, I won't say new quarterbacks, but you got a backup and for Toronto playing essentially, and then you got a new quarterback in Montreal. Defenses tend to show a lot of new looks week one because they've been kind of just playing milli-vanilli man coverage, evaluating guys in the preseason. So I think there'll be some struggles there, but I think Montreal is ultimately a more talented team at home. I expect them to probably get it done.
All right, the two games on Saturday. It's a doubleheader Saturday night. Hamilton, Calgary. Hamilton, 1-point road favorites, 52.5 the total. We mentioned it, Calgary's defense. I want to attack Calgary's defense early because I think 75% new faces. Wasn't a good defense last year. Hamilton's the kind of team that could really, really slice and dice that defense with how good the Ticat offense, and it's even better on paper with the addition of Kenny Lawler in particular this year. So I like Hamilton should win, but I caution you. We lost in Calgary last year in week one. That was a bad Calgary team too. I think I like the team total more with Hamilton, because their defense is going to be better, but will it be better right away with the new faces and the new coordinator, Brent Monson, who, of course, is a former Calgary defensive coordinator. So a nice little subplot here in this game. So I think it's just the safer bet. Hamilton can win this game. I think they should win this game, but I like the team total part of it even more, over 26.5. That way, if they lose 31-28, I'm still going to win the bet with Hamilton's team total over, because I could still see them giving up some points, but I think they can absolutely carve up Calgary's defense here, though. So I really like Hamilton team total over, and full game over I think can get there. It's the highest total on the board in week one for a reason, in my opinion, 52.5. Will, what do you think here? Ticats, Stamps.
This one, you and I see eye to eye. I agree. I think Hamilton gets it done, and I like the overs you mentioned.
All right, Edmonton, BC. This side is a little tricky because I leave the door open for Edmonton to be better this year. Trey Ford's first start now that he knows he's the QB1 entering the season. We talked about how, the defense on paper, it could take time, though, for Edmonton's defense. BC's really done a number on them over the years, and Nathan Rourke looked awesome. Keep in mind, Nathan Rourke was in there against the starting defense for Edmonton because that was their home preseason game last week in Edmonton. And that was the starting defense that was on the field for Edmonton, and Rourke just picked them apart in the 2 drives he was out there. So I think this is an over, too. It's been an over series history between the Elks and the Lions, especially the games in BC. That's probably all I'm going to stick to is the over. I think from a side perspective, it's a little bit tricky. Edmonton was not bad as a road. put it this way, Will. They've been awful over the years at Commonwealth. Terrible home record.
Yes.
Terrible fan attendance. But on the road, especially catching points as a dog, they've been cashing some tickets, ATS at times over the years. So if you're going to bet Edmonton, it's better to take points with them on the road than probably take them at home until they show you they can finally play better at Commonwealth Stadium. That would be my suggestion. But for me, primarily, I like over 48.5 here. What do you think, Will, for the final game of week 1, Edmonton, BC?
Yeah, I love the over here, and this was the matchup I was most torn about. As if you listened, BC was my team that I thought was going to have the most success this season. They were my great Cup pick, and then Edmonton was the team that I thought could make the biggest jump. And I think seeing Trey Ford in week 1, I think he'll make some noise, make a lot of plays, and then I think Nathan Rourke and that offense will have some production too. So I love the over here. I'm just torn as to what I think is ultimately going to happen in the game. We go upset alert. Elks getting
going with
5.5
Edmonton.
points.
Yes.
Yep.
See, I'm also looking at this and say, Edmonton, BC, this feels short for BC, minus 5.5 at home against a team they've dominated. But they didn't finish the season strong last year, and we do think Edmonton's a little bit better. Maybe they're only laying 5.5 points here, the BC Lions, for a reason. So, you look at it that way. That's a great. I'm really intrigued by that game. I'm with you. That's definitely one of the games. How does Trey Ford fare in his first start? That defense we think is going to be better for Edmonton. I don't love their defense this week because it's on the road against Nathan Rourke, and I think the defense could need time to gel. But I do think they've made inroads with the D, and it will be better, in the future. If not right away, but in the future for sure. This has been great. It didn't feel like an hour, I'll tell you that. But a great show. Great to have Will Arndt back, and great just to be back for another season of Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy. Will, let's wrap it up with best bets. That's how we wrap up the show. We'll go to you first. Week 1, best bet. If you had one, what would it be?
I would say, ironically, the last thing we talked about. I would say my best bet would be to bang the over in that Edmonton Elks BC Lions game. I think BC has shown a track record of lighting up this Edmonton defense, and I think Trey Ford and this offense is finally going to be let loose. They're going to make plays. It might look unorthodox at times, but I think ultimately that's going to result in points on the scoreboard. So between those both sides at 48.5 points, bang the over.
All right, Edmonton, BC, over 48.5 for Will Arndt with his week 1 best bet. Mine's going to be, it's an interesting call here. I'm going to go with that Alouettes team total on Friday night. Friday night football tonight. We always love that TSN theme song. But yeah, Montreal team total over 26.5. I think Montreal, and I believe Davis Alexander is going to be good for them. I think he's going to be very good. And I think Toronto, this is more to Toronto's defense. You lost 6 regular players in the D-line rotation. You've lost multiple starters in the secondary. That's a lot to replace and expect to be great in week 1. And a new coordinator, as Will mentioned, on the defensive side for Toronto as well. So I think Montreal takes advantage of that, but I'll go with the team total instead of minus 4.5. So Alouettes team total over 26.5 for my week 1 CFL best bet on Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy. Will, final thoughts before we wrap up the show?
No, I'm so glad to be back with all you guys. The CFL, while it wasn't something I was a part of last year, I love keeping in touch with people in the league and being able to talk about it. It is, as a football guy from the United States, it is something I cherish. To all my Canadians out there, hello. It's just a great league and a really great product. So I'm excited that's back. And, stories like David father or Bill Stiegel's son, you just want to remember that like football is family and all the good people elements that come along with this stuff. So just as we go through the season, remember to be good to people, be kind, and enjoy what this great game brings to us.
Yeah, I'll just say a couple of things. Well, first of all, on a negative note regarding TSN, I'm very, very disgusted that they did not bring Matt Dunnigan back. I think that's a mistake. I think he's a great personality for the sport. I'm very disappointed he's not working with TSN anymore. I didn't like that decision. And then on the other element with TSN, though, yes, the passing of Milt Stiegel's son, Chase, man. Just Chase Stiegel, just heartbreaking, gut-wrenching. All you can say is thoughts, condolences, prayers, well wishes to the family. Milt and his family. And no father, no parent should have to go through a tragedy and losing their kid at that age. It's just awful to hear that. And he's such a great guy. He's so good on television. He's a great personality, Milt Stegall, full energy, like me, full energy. You just hate to see him going through something like this. So thoughts, prayers, well wishes to the Stegall family for sure. Will, this has been a blast. We'll get you on a bunch more times throughout the CFL season. Looking forward to it. That's a wrap for Will Arndt. I'm Ian Cameron. Have a great week. Enjoy CFL Week 1 and good luck. And we will be back next week for the Week 2 CFL edition of Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy.